Over the years, I've had many great experiences playing multiplayer online shooting games. You know, those sleepless sleepover nights when you and your friends hook a bunch of computers up and just kill each other over and over in a multiplayer FPS? Yeah, exactly those. Never in all of this time playing them, however, have I ever stopped to try and appreciate all the work that has gone into designing the individual maps. And it doesn't matter what game you look into, Battlefield, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, all of these games have maps which have been handcrafted to perfection and tested over and over again to make sure they're at least somewhat fair and balanced and fun to play. Now, over all of these years, one of my favorite games in this genre has become Valve's Orange Box release of TF2. And granted, you can make the argument that now the game is almost dead because of its poor server management, but you can definitely not deny the fact that it is one of the most popular first-person shooter multiplayer games out there. And in my personal opinion, a lot of that can be attributed to its clever map design. But how do you actually do that? How do you just take a chunk of land, place some geometry around it, and make it into a fun map? Well, today I'm going to look at exactly how does Team Fortress 2 craft good maps. For the sake of this analysis, I'm going to take one of my personal favorites. It is a payload map called Upward. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with what payload game mode means, I'm just going to quickly sum it up for you. There are two teams on the map, divided into the team that's going to be pushing the payload and the team that's going to be defending. Payload is a cart placed on a set of tracks that run all the way through the map from the first initial spawn point of the pushing team to the last spawn point of the defending team. Manage to push the cart all the way through and you win the game. Now, when analyzing any multiplayer FPS map, and it doesn't even matter if it's capture the flag, payload, or team deathmatch, there are many aspects you have to look into. For the sake of the video, I will be looking into 4 separate categories, those being map flow, player attention, map balance, and replayability. So let's start from the top. Map flow. What the hell is that? Well, as the name suggests, it is the way you want players to, well, flow through your map. Simply put, if you were to just hold down W and use your mouse to look around, you should be able to easily maneuver around your map without having to do any awkward, weird turns or running into dead ends. There are a couple of shapes which game developers prefer when it comes to designing maps, specifically when it comes to designing deathmatch, but we can easily see these on Payload Upward as well. Most popular shapes being the circle, the figure 8, or any combination of the two. What this ensures is that players are able to navigate the map fluently, easily, and without running into awkward geometry or things that would stop their progress. This also helps with the creation of so-called battle zones, which will simply be areas of your map where the battle will be mostly focused. Now, to a lot of you, these could for example be choke points, or wide open areas with some cover as geometry scattered around them. Then there are areas of the map which are mostly transitional. These would be side staircases or anything off the main route, which allows you to quickly traverse the map and kind of gives you an option of avoiding the main combat. But alright, well, right now all we have is the basic geometry. We have some form of map flow, right? Your payload kind of leads from one spawn to the other. You have designed a couple combat zones, and those combat zones have a pretty nice flow. So what's next? Well, now we need to focus our attention, quite literally, at the player. Now, if you remember in my previous video, I talked about how avoiding being overwhelmed by choices can be done by giving the player enough information about said choices. Now, even though we're not really deciding between towns to travel to and quests to do here, the theory of this still very much applies. You always want to provide your player with information on where to go, what to do, and how will that help him. I decided to take this one particular screenshot of Upward and analyze it for it a little bit. Let's first look down at the ground. You can clearly see the tracks, which in payload maps are a wonderful tool for guiding the player towards where they're supposed to push the card, or if the card has already been past that place, how they can run up to it and find it. On your left, you can also see a health pack, meaning that if a player has low health, they can consider, should I keep pushing towards the card, or do I need to take a health pack instead? For the more direction needy, you also have the giant white arrow on a blue background pointing you in the direction. Another wonderful thing about the art of Team Fortress 2 is that it allows them to do stuff like this. And from a map design perspective, there is not much more you could do to direct the players than giving them giant arrows showing them the directions. Now lastly, we have something called a landmark. As you can see, there is a checkpoint on the payload tracks, right? The one that when you push your card through it, you gain some additional time. Now this checkpoint is further distinguished by having that giant red floating logo on top of it, which also helps inform the players which team is currently in control. So you see, just taking this random screenshot, you can already tell a lot about the map, about where the card is in comparison to your position right now, where you need to go to get some health, and which way you can take to get to the combat areas. This is exactly the type of way you want to direct your players' attention in order for the map to be interesting and open to even newcomers. But alright, let's say you've gone through your areas and you've designed them, you've given them the proper flow, and you've also made sure to direct the player's attention towards the right things. Now comes the hard part, because your map is probably already playable, you need to balance it. And as much as I'd love to say that Team Fortress uses some new, innovative, crazy technology to balance their maps, they don't. In fact, the way that most multiplayer maps are balanced in development is playtesting, and a huge amount of that. A few good rules of thumb would be to try to provide enough cover for both sides, give everyone proper access to your health packs and ammo packs, and in case of the payload maps, give the proper timer for the game to finish. Chances are, if you're trying to construct a map for a game, first time you do this and you have people play it over and over, you're gonna find out that it's not balanced at all, and you're gonna have to do a lot of tweaking, but that is what the process is about. I can assure you that there aren't many multiplayer maps out there that were perfect the second they were built in their first iteration. And even now, years after release of Team Fortress 2, whether by Valve's mistake or just general laziness, some of the maps still feel pretty imbalanced, especially if you ask the player base. But okay, you've done the flow, you have the player's attention, and your map is somewhat balanced. The final step to all of this, and maybe it's not the final step in the design process, just the one thing that envelopes all of this, is replayability. You want your maps to be playable over and over again as many times as is necessary. So how can you do that? Well, usually the easiest way would be always staying off player choice. Once again, we come back to Sid Meier, but he's right. Even in this one picture, you can see 3 immediate main routes that the player can take, being the left top one, then following the tracks, or go around the right side, with countless other smaller, well, let's call them ninja routes, stuck in between them. You can jump across the tracks. If you're a scout, you can get on top of this rock formation and leap onto the building with the arrow. You can drop down from that building at any point. It's giving the player the option of movement that will create these endless different scenarios and pretty much make every game different. If we all be fighting in a hallway with a single box, I can assure you that after 100 games, you would see that the games always play out more or less the same. It is when you can create these interesting options and give the players a lot of decisions on where to go that you get every match to be a little bit different, and make sure that your game is replayable over and over and the map doesn't get stale after a couple games. So let's quickly recap. What does Team Fortress and, well, most likely any other first-person FPS shooter multiplayer game out there do to craft good maps? Well, firstly, they focus on map flow, making sure that the players can get from one area to the next fluently, they don't run into any dead ends, there are no rooms with just one exit, and you can always fluently get from one area to the next. Second of all, they do a good job of guiding the player attention to the important landmarks and goals, always giving you a solid idea of where you are in contrast to the map, as well as how to get to the next fight area or how to follow the cart. Thirdly, it does a lot of map balancing. If you analyze the areas, you can quickly come to the conclusion that both the sides have more or less the same amount of health. The spawn points are fairly placed in similar distances to the cart based on its position at the moment, and both teams have an equal amount of routes and cover to take when engaging in combat. And lastly, it's all about that replayability. Team Fortress 2 makes sure that on its maps you have multiple routes to take so that every match plays out a little bit differently, and you can always pull off some crazy strategy and hope that it works if it looks like your team is losing. And that is it for me in this video. Is this all that goes into creating a multiplayer map? Of course not. It's usually a lengthy process that involves a lot of testing and a lot of iterations, and more specifically, every single map is gonna have the process be a little bit different simply because of that. No two maps are exactly the same. Are there sometimes exceptions to these rules? Of course there are. There are many maps out there which use, in my opinion, very much experimental level design that work out amazingly. What I'm listing here are simply some good rules of thumb to think about when designing your own multiplayer maps, if you ever do that, or if you want to appreciate the design that went into other multiplayer maps in your favorite game out there. Am I saying that Team Fortress 2 has the best map design out there? Of course not. There are many others which display brilliance in this area. In my opinion, Counter-Strike Go is a great example of pretty much everything I talked about here. So if you're a big CSGO player, go play your favorite map and see if you can spot these points when you're playing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I might suggest you check out my other game design videos and maybe consider subscribing because I'm going to be delivering more content like this in the future. That's it from me. I wish you all a beautiful rest of today, and I'm going to see you all in the next video I make. Bye bye.